Good morning, everybody. I'm Brent Spence.
I'm Darwin Perez.
And welcome to our annual 2020 Hurricane Preparedness Update. We broadcast this every June. On top of being the Executive Director here at Regency Oaks, I am also one of the emergency captains, along with Darwin Perez, our Maintenance Director, and John Staniford, who is our Director of Security. The three of us have put together and worked with the department managers in crafting this year's 2020 hurricane plan, which we are excited to share with you today. We're going to jump right into the presentation. Our success in this process depends upon previous preparation, and without such preparation, there is sure to be a failure. This is a quote from Confucius. And so once a year, all of the department heads start in late March to prepare for the hurricane season. We are inventorying our supplies. We are checking to make sure that our emergency generators are functional. If any of the work needs to be done on them to make sure they're ready for the season, we're doing that. We're going through and reviewing our plans, updating our agreements, whether they're transfer agreements or emergency water or bus agreements. All of the hours of preparation that go into making sure that we're going to have a safe and successful hurricane season. The emergency manual is primarily designed to do three things. It establishes the responsibilities and provides the guidelines that we use to communicate with our residents, our staff, and our family, and provides the structure by which support is provided during a weather-related or other type of emergency. The first goal is to identify and establish a committee comprised of representatives from each department who will provide support and guidance for our communities directly affected by severe weather or other emergency situations. Now you'll notice that the Brookdale verbiage is still in our presentation. Brookdale's presentation was a very good one, and we are borrowing the format even though we are now managed by LCS. LCS, a very large provider of CCRCs in the country, in fact, the nation's largest provider, they also have quite a large presence here in Florida. And so there are a lot of similarities in this program and in the Brookdale program. We will also have support services standing by in the event of a weather-related emergency. It will look a little different than the way Brookdale did it, but it will have the same effect. They will have pre-positioned supplies. There will be multiple daily support and resource calls, all to make sure that the communities who are in the harm's way of a potential landfall are being supported, and that we have the resources we need to successfully weather the storm. The second goal is to provide a systems and general protocol for maintaining communications with residents, families, and associates during emergencies. As you might recall from previous experiences and going through hurricanes, it is not unusual to lose a landline. Once the storm hits, cell phone towers are always the first to go. And so the usual means of communication are not necessarily going to be there when we need them. Our TVs will go down. We will lose our ability to use our phone lines and our mobile phones, and so communication becomes a really important way not only of getting a message to you, our residents, but to your families as well, who might be inquiring as to your safety. The third goal is to provide a supportive venue for community staff to help in coordinating logistic needs affected by severe weather and emergencies. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation. So as we have seen firsthand with other hurricanes, they don't just impact the shoreline or the coast. We can expect strong winds, torrential rain, flooding, tornadoes far inland from the actual impact zone of the hurricane. For this year, we're looking at the numbers from the Colorado State University, and we have the projections there in the left-hand side compared to the average over the last 2 decades, 81 through 2010. So Colorado State, which is, I believe, the leading forecast agency in the country, is predicting a very active season. 19 named storms as opposed to a 2-decade average of 12. That's primarily because you will recall we had a very warm winter, and we have already started off with a warm summer that is just going to get hotter. The number of named storm days is up from 59 as an average to 85. So what that tells us is we're going to see a lot of Gulf activity because the waters over the Gulf Stream will drive those hurricanes up into the Gulf. And once they get into the Gulf, because of the warm water, they tend to linger. We are expecting 9 of those named storms to become hurricanes, and they're nearly predicting double the number of hurricane days from 24 to 40. They are thinking that 4 of the hurricanes are going to be major hurricanes. That's a level 3 or greater. And major hurricane days, that means when we are in the eye of the storm, instead of 6.2, which has been our average, they're predicting 9. So heightened sensitivity after recent storms, Harvey, Irma, the wildfires that we've had in California, not so much this year, but certainly in the last few years, the tornadoes that we see, particularly in the Midwest this spring, all of that have caused our families and our residents to want to know and be assured that Regency Oaks is ready for any eventuality and that we are prepared to handle the hurricanes. During the month of May and June, we've been reviewing the emergency manuals and updating our preparation. We've completed the steps detailed in preparing for an emergency no notice as opposed to a hurricane which is noticed. Now what that means is a hurricane, we will see it coming. We will have 5 to 7 days to get ready and be prepared, and that's different from a no notice emergency like the railroad tracks south of us on McMullen Booth having a derailment and there are chemical or hazardous materials on board, and it calls for an emergency response that is immediate and you don't have advance notice. So when we talk about the preparation that we do on an annual basis, it's not just for preparing for a weather-related event. There's a category of 15 different non-weather related emergencies that we update and prepare for as well. Our emergency preparedness plan is reviewed by the local authorities and is signed off by the county regulatory department over in our assisted living and skilled nursing. Here in the IL, It is reviewed, but we do not require a signature. And our overall goal is to communicate the overview of the plan so that residents are confident that we are prepared and ready to handle the storm. We want to support beyond the community team with access to buses and other resources. We are not in this alone. There are others that are behind the scenes supporting us and providing resources, and we get to take advantage of the broad network that LCS has to support Regency Oaks if it's our turn to be in the eye of the storm. We identify options for evacuations. We're going to talk specifically about how evacuations work and what your choices are. And then finally, this is going to be a little challenging this year, but we always want to make sure that we're listening and taking questions from our residents and families about concerns they might have. This year, because we are still not at the point where we can get together as a family to discuss this, it's more of a one-way communication, and I apologize for that, but I still think this information is valuable, worth sharing, and that you will benefit from knowing. All right.
Emergency communication plan updates the responsibility party contacts information, including the email addresses, phone numbers, and billing system as soon as possible. Create an Outlook family distribution list for the community to use in events, emails, communications is necessary. Updating any internal emergency contact listing for all current residents. Maintaining current emergency contact lists and phone numbers for all associates. Emergency communication plans, primary source of communications and the newsroom crisis page, which will activate in the events of severe emergencies. 24/7 updates during severe weather. Residents and family connection line, email, and phone.
The emergency manual and our format is designed into life cycles, and I always like to kid Don Infante, and I say this is like the Army. Anytime there's an issue, all someone in the Army has to do is pull out the manual, and they have a procedure that they can follow and a checklist of accomplishments. We've taken that same concept because it works, and we've incorporated it into our emergency manual format. The first stage is awareness. The additional stages are standby, decision, implementation, landfall, and after action. Awareness starts 72 hours before the storm. This is where we are alerting companies that are our support partners, like for fuel and water, and getting them set up for an emergency situation. We're checking that our radios and batteries and flashlights are up and running. We're activating our emergency supply list. We're filling up our ice machines. We're reviewing the resident list to make sure we are prepared and that our contact information is up to date. Our standby starts at 60 hours and goes to 48 hours before storm impact. This is where we are establishing our staff and volunteers, defining our rest areas. We are announcing what residents should bring with them in the event of an emergency. We are tying down exterior items, removing pool furniture and furniture off of your lanai. We are creating our checkout and check-in list, and home health is starting to confirm staffing for residents during the storm. The next stage is the decision making. I'm going to talk very specifically about that in the steps that come. The implementation stage is the last minute. What are we doing? We are already, the decision to go or not go has been made, and we are making the decisions on, stop that. So this is the implementation stage. The decision making has already occurred. People have made the decision to leave or stay, and we are simply executing and taking the final preparations before landfall, the next step. Okay, this is the point in the plan where we start talking about your decision to go or not go. But before you can make that decision, in the interest of full disclosure, this is always where I like to make sure that you are aware of some information and that you know the consequences of the decision that you are required to make. The first thing that I'd like to share with you, that if residents evacuate with LCS or Regency Oaks, they are not allowed to take scooters due to the lack of space on buses, vans, and other evacuation vehicles. So if you are relying on a scooter in order to ambulate, you are not eligible to evacuate with residents here at Regency Oaks. We will need to arrange very early on for your evacuation without using the vans and the buses. IL residents who are going to stay for the hurricane or choose to evacuate must have a supply list. The supply list for staying is very different than the supply list for evacuation. It is important for you to know, if you are considering staying, that our plan for a major hurricane, this is a level 3, 4, or 5 hurricane, is that the upper floors will be evacuated. So residents who live on the 4th or 5th floor will be required before the landfall event and potentially after to relocate to the 2nd and 3rd floors. You primarily will be in hallways, and so I want you to be sure, if you live on the 4th or 5th floor, you're aware of that before you make your decision. Please remember that you will be confined to your respective building, and residents will be instructed to move to the hallways for their safety during the landfall event, if this is to protect you from broken glass and flying projectiles. Okay, we have two options. Select one of the plans and stick to it. Do not wait until the last minute to activate your plan. And this is important because you will recall that there are evacuation zones out of Pinellas County. The primary evacuation route is US 19. The secondary for us is 75, State Road 75. At the time of an evacuation, those roads will be converted to one way to accommodate extra traffic. You have all seen the photographs from prior years where people wait until the last minute. They get out there and they try to go north. They are stuck in long lines. You see cars running out of gas and being pulled over on the side of the highways, stuck, no gas to move forward, no way to get support to them. It's important that if you choose to evacuate, that you do it early. Your two options are get out And I'm just going to be honest with you. This is the recommendation we make. If we have a Hurricane 1 or 2 storm headed our way, Regency Oaks will weather that storm without any problem. If it is a major hurricane, that's considered a Hurricane 3, 4, or 5, we recommend that you get out. If you have a daughter in Orlando, go visit. If you have family in Atlanta, go visit. But get out of the path of the storm. It's not your safety that we are concerned about. You absolutely can stay here at Regency Oaks and be safe. What you will not be is comfortable. The air conditioners are not going to work. We will lose power. There will not be lighting. You will need to be self-sufficient. You will need to have water. You will need to have emergency lanterns and flashlights with a good supply of batteries. And you might expect that we will be down for 2-3 days. And it's a matter of being uncomfortable as opposed to being unsafe. And so consider that as you make your decision. Your second option is to stay. Regency Oaks is a well-constructed facility. I always say we are on the top of a virtual mountain. We are 85 feet above sea level. We're one of the highest points in all of Pinellas County, and we are far away from the coast. We are not in a flood zone, and we are not in a mandatory evacuation zone. So you do have the option to stay here if you choose. Now, all of this is subject to what the local, regional, and state authorities decide to do. Over the last few years, as we've learned more about surviving and dealing with hurricanes, we have seen a tendency for the state to order full evacuations for areas. Regency Oaks, if Pinellas County was declared an emergency zone and the governor said he wanted Pinellas County to be evacuated, Regency Oaks would be subject to that evacuation and we would be required to evacuate. So that is the third possibility that I want you to be aware of. You could choose to stay knowing that you were going to be safe, realizing that you would be uncomfortable, only to have the governor step in at a later date and say, no, I'm evacuating all of Pinellas County, including Regency Oaks. Oh yeah, there's that. Just a reminder, so I can't say this enough times, essential services provided by the phone company, the utility company, the TV company is very likely going to be interrupted. So you can expect to be uncomfortable for an extended period of time, up to and exceeding a week, should you decide to stay. The emergency generator does not have any service to the individual apartments here at Regency Oaks. Perfect.
What is on the emergency power Regency Oaks? Limited lighting in hallways, lobbies, areas, stairwells, dining rooms, also limited lighting around building exterior. Elevators, all residents, elevators. Limited dining room lighting, fire alarm panels, business phones, emergency call systems, food services, kitchen equipment, limited power at both front desks, triage arrangements. What is not under emergency power at Regency Oaks apartments are not on the emergency power system. You should have at least one flashlight, batteries, power lanterns with several extra batteries in case of an emergency. Do not use candles.
So here's a couple of things that we recommend you do. you should have a grab-and-go case ready. And this is whether your intentions are to go or not go. Absolutely, if you're going to get out of the harm's way, you need that grab-and-go case. You also need it packed in case the governor comes in at the last minute and decides that we are going to be evacuated after all. Organize your legal, financial, insurance paperwork into a file that you can grab and head out the door. You want to have things like your birth certificate, your social security card, a list of your prescription, a copy of your driver's license, and some emergency cash. Cash is really important in a hurricane because ATM machines are not going to work. Service stations are not going to be able to accept anything but cash. Grocery stores will not be able to check you out or sell you items because they're not going to have the power. So having some emergency cash is a really smart thing to do. You want to make a contact list. Friends, relatives, people that you will want to call and let them know that you're safe. You also want to bring with you a list of your trusted advisors. This is your physician, attorney, financial advisor, accountant, insurance agent. This is all for after the storm has passed and you're left to pick up the pieces. You're going to want to have those resources with you so that they can assist you in helping to put your life back together. You want to prepare a household inventory. You know, if you suffer a claim, everyone always thinks that, oh, well, I can remember what was in my house. But in fact, that's really a difficult thing to do. The recommendation that I like the best is to take a video walkthrough of your home. Capture all of your possessions and your knickknacks and your furniture and artwork and make sure that's the best way to document what your loss actually was and to make sure that you get a full reimbursement for whatever was lost in the storm. All right, the one last thing that I wanted to cover this morning is we talked about the grab and go, and we also talked about the responsibilities that residents have. They have two responsibilities. The first is to decide, do they stay or do they go? And the second is to make sure that they have prepared themselves in their apartment with an emergency supply list. And I want to take just a few minutes to go through that emergency supply list. Now, Lauren is going to be putting in your mailboxes this evening the 3-page handout that we share every year. It summarizes the most important aspects as it relates to your responsibilities. So you'll have this information in your mailboxes this afternoon. You want to make sure you have a battery-powered radio. Now, one of the suggestions from one of our subcommittees that works with our Roto board, this year has recommended that Regency invest in battery-operated radios and that we provide one to every single resident. The reason that's important, the radio signals are able to be broadcast even when the TV signals have been lost. So that's one change that we will be making this year. You want to make sure that you have an adequate supply of flashlights and fresh batteries. That's really, really important. I have heard stories of residents who had lots of batteries, but they were 3 or 4 years old. They put the batteries in the flashlight and they got about an hour's worth of usage. Batteries do wear over time, even though they may not be in use. So invest in fresh batteries to make sure that you're going to have an ample supply of lighting. Canned foods, canned milk, canned food products, an important part of your emergency supply, as long as you remember to include a can opener. They are not going to do you any good if you don't have means of being able to open them. We also recommend that you have a generous supply of handy wipes, hand sanitizers, and a battery-operated mister. We've talked about how this is going to be an uncomfortable experience, but this will help make it a safer experience. A first aid kit is a good idea, so that you just have a standard first aid kit with tape and gauze and antibiotic cream and Band-Aids in case you will need that. Medications. Before the storm arrives, it's important that you call your pharmacy and ask the pharmacist to give you at least an additional 2-week supply of your medications. Pharmacies have been trained in the state of Florida in advance of a storm to accommodate these requests, and it's important that you have that extra 2 weeks. Remember, your pharmacy may be damaged during this storm, and it may be several weeks before they are able to reopen on an emergency basis. If you have oxygen and utilize oxygen either in your apartment or in the common areas, or have a CPAP machine, make sure that you have all the supplies that you need and order extra oxygen as well. Bleach for sterilizing your bathtub. If you have a bathtub, your primary source of water will be your bathtubs. And our bathtubs are 40 gallons and they require a 1/4 of a cup of bleach in order to sanitize and make that water safe for consumption. So fill your bathtub up to the top, add a 1/4 of a cup of bleach, and that becomes sanitized water. I want to talk just a little bit about your water supply. Our recommendation is 6 gallons of water per day per person. 3 of those for cooking and consumption, and 3 gallons for sanitation and hygiene. So you have your primary water supply for consumption in your bathtub. What are you going to use for your non-consumption water? One of the recommendations that we have is the bladders. You can buy a 2, 5, 10-gallon bladder. They're plastic, they're collapsible, they're compact. They will go up in a closet, they will go in a kitchen drawer, and they're available for you to fill up in advance of the storm. And then once the storm has passed, you can discard them or try to empty them and repack them, although I'll warn you, they never repack quite as small as they come from the manufacturer. It's important that you have blankets, towels, toiletries, pillows, all of that ready to go in the event that the storm looks like it's going to hit. Remember, we will ask you to leave your apartment, go into a corridor, and we want you to be as comfortable as possible, so you will need to bring those bedding supplies with you. You will also want to have a rubber stopper. Not all rubber stoppers are the same, and only certain rubber stoppers, in our experience, have we found work on our tubs. And so we do have a recommended stopper, and every year, we've done this in the past, we will do it again this year. If you need the rubber stopper that works in your tub, if you need a lantern, if you need a mister, if you need a hurricane supply, we will put the samples at both front desks with the price, and we will order them in bulk. So if I have 50 residents who need a lantern, Darwin will order it from our supply house, get them in, we will charge your account and get you that through bulk. You're not required to do that, you can use your other source, but that is a convenience service that we provide the residents. We've already talked about getting cash. I also want to remind you to please go and fill up your car well in advance of the storm. One of the issues that we've had in the past is people going out in panic mode and filling up and topping off their gas tanks 2 and 3 times a week. We found in the last experience that our staff was really struggling with the ability to get gasoline because stores were out and it just wasn't readily available. As part of our emergency planning, we have set up a system where our primary or secondary source of gas in the event that there is a shortage out in the community is to tap into the gas supply of our residents here at Regency Oaks. And so we have invested in a siphoning hose and a power pump that's battery operated, and we will try to buy 3 or 4 gallons from each resident. You know, we have 190 cars, so we have a stockpile of fuel. And not only that, we will pay you top value for your gasoline plus a premium. But that's one way you can assist us, is in making sure that our associates have the gasoline they need to get to and from work and be here to take care of your needs. So that concludes our remarks for this afternoon. We hope you find this information valuable. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Darwin, myself, John Staniford at night. We are the 3 hurricane preparedness captains, and we'll be happy to try to answer any questions you might have. Be safe, and we'll see you out and about. Thanks.